Hey guys. So we are done with sleep stages. So now we're going to move on to the different kinds of sleep disorders that can be diagnosed in people. Some of them kids find very fascinating. Some of them kids are intimately aware of because they suffer from them themselves. So for the most part, this content's pretty straightforward, and easy to fill in on your notes as you go. So let's talk about the definition of sleep disorders, okay? Any kind of serious disturbance that is present in a person's normal sleep pattern that interferes with their ability to function normally and that impacts their personal health. That's going to be a sleep disorder, okay? So, for example, one of the disorders I'm going to talk about is something called sleep apnea. Sleep apneatics have circumstances where they stop breathing upwards of hundreds of times a night. Okay. Obviously, that is an impact not only to personal health because that could kill them, but also it interferes with their daily functioning because they're not sleeping soundly through the night. They're being constantly woken up as a result of that. Okay. So anything that interferes with normal daily functioning and a person's personal health can ultimately be diagnosed as a sleep disorder. So insomnia is the first one we're going to talk about because it's by far the most widely diagnosed sleep disorder out there. Okay, so insomnia is a person's prolonged inability to get adequate sleep. Now, it can be coming from one of two categories. In some circumstances, it could even be both. Okay, so it can come from difficulty falling asleep. So a person is just unable to disengage. They've just got way too much going on in their head. And so they just think and they 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 think. Because think about it, when you go to bed, that's when you're not doing anything other than just laying there. That's why so many kids feel the need to have TV going, watching Netflix or something along those lines because it helps to kind of divert their brain's attention. But if you're just sitting there and you've had all of these things that have overwhelmed you through your day, it's very hard for a person to shut that off, and disengage the way they need to. And so, that can end up causing a person to be incapable of getting a decent night's sleep. Another thing that could cause insomnia is the inability to stay asleep during the night. So you don't have problems falling asleep, but the issue for you is you wake up constantly throughout the night. That would be yours truly. We've had numerous conversations about my children. It is currently, as I videotape this, 11:15 in the evening. I would bet that my kids, one of them, is going to be up probably within, I'd say, the next hour and a half. So as soon as I'm done videotaping this, I'm going to bed. And so I'll have my first interruption in my sleep in approximately about an hour. And then my son, on average, he wakes up anywhere from 2 to 4 times a night. And on good nights, if he is able to sleep through for longer periods, because he's teething, he's got multiple first year molars coming in right now. So the poor guy is just suffering big time. If he is able to have a decent night where he's able to sleep a little bit more soundly, sleep through the pain, just because he's sleeping doesn't mean I keep sleeping. My body is so used to waking up so many times overnight because of my kids, that I still wake up at 3 in the morning, then 4 in the morning. And because I'm used to waking up at 5 a.m. definitively for school, I'll wake up then too. So I have issues with being able to stay asleep. And that is what has contributed to my insomnia. It's very common for you to see in terms of a cause for insomniacs. Biggest issue is stress and anxiety. Like I mentioned earlier, with those who just can't fall asleep. When you've got a lot on your plate and you feel really overwhelmed and you think of all of the things that you've got to get done in a day and things like that, it can become really overwhelming for people. And it's just really hard to stay asleep, because people, when they're stressed and anxious, they can also end up having those anxieties and those fears and those worries seep into their dreams too. And so their sleep isn't something that's terribly restful when they're dealing with it. In terms of treatment, it's important to recognize that one of the biggest things that they're going to do to treat you isn't necessarily to give medications first and foremost. They're going to try to wait on that. What they're going to try to teach you is stimulus control. So, hate to break it to you, teenies, but you should not be doing any work in your bedroom. Your bedroom should be only for sleep. That's the first thing that they're going to do. Because what sleep specialists know is you have trained your brain to think bedroom means activity. Think about it. For you guys, for teens in particular, your privacy from your parents is so important, which is hilarious considering how much you put out there on the internet for people to see of your personal life that makes it horribly unprivate. But that's a conversation for a different day. You guys do your homework in your room for your privacy. You sit on your phones in your room for your privacy. You watch all your TikTok videos and this, that, and the other. You do all of that stuff in your room. You're probably even doing all of your schoolwork right now in your room. And you shouldn't be, because what's happening is the brain is making this crazy unconscious association that the environment that you're in right now means go, 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 go. Always be active. And so when your brain and body are then in your bedroom at night, it doesn't know how to make that change. And so it's still operating under the assumption that room means go, 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 go. And so it can't shut off. So what they're going to tell you to do in those circumstances, if you go to a sleep specialist, is to train you. Bedroom means sleep and sleep only. It should be dark. You shouldn't be doing any activities in it. You should only be going to bed there. And so what you have to do is basically retrain yourself to see your bedroom only as sleep. If that doesn't work, then they will move the carefully controlled medications. Okay, but that is a much bigger step, simply just because they don't like to give medications for insomnia to teens because y'all are still growing. Your brain isn't fully formed yet, and so they don't want to do that for fear of altering your brain and its development. So sleep apnea is your next disorder that we're going to talk about. And so sleep apnea is, as you heard me reference earlier, it's when a person stops breathing throughout the night. And it can happen upwards of hundreds of times a night. In some circumstances, it can be so bad, a person can stop breathing hundreds of times an hour, which is really intense, okay? They're constantly sleepy. They can have high levels of irritability throughout the day because they just struggle to get adequate amounts of sleep. It's more prevalent in men who are over the age of 50 and also overweight. However, you're seeing more and more people being diagnosed with sleep apnea. And so one of the most positive treatments out there is something called the CPAP. This stands for continuous positive airway pressure. The CPAP used to look like this. Now they've gotten an awful lot more cool with the tech, and they've actually got a wireless CPAP out there, because one of the biggest things that was kind of warding people with sleep apnea away from the CPAP is this mask that has to be like suctioned to their face, and then these wires that connect you to the airway pressure system. Because how this thing works, by wearing this mask, what this machine does for you is it breathes for you. It regulates your breathing, so it's constantly pushing air into the air passages so that way you can breathe normally, because that's not happening for you naturally. But with the kind of the cordless and the wireless CPAP now, people are able to wear this headgear on their face and still be able to kind of move and roll and sleep on their side and stuff like that to feel more comfortably. I know so many students that have shared family members that were diagnosed with sleep apnea. They were given a CPAP and they think that this thing is just a life changer. But there were some who just felt that it was way too noisy, it was too loud, it was too clunky, and they just couldn't handle it. So in some circumstances, then, if the CPAP doesn't work, they'll go with mouthpieces. They might even prescribe weight control, so they might push you to lose weight, since those who are overweight do tend to struggle more with sleep apnea issues. They'll push you to try to lose weight, so that way you don't have as much pressure on the lungs and the airway systems. Or if need be, they'll do surgery if it's drastic enough. In some circumstances, though, behavioral treatment can end up impacting sleep apnea. And so they can just adjust things with like how you sleep in terms of a pillow or something along those lines. So that's sleep apnea. All right. Oh, it looks like my Skeeter, the narcoleptic poodle, won't pop up for you right now while I'm trying to videotape this. But narcolepsy is when a person has sleep attacks. Okay. So they will instantaneously and immediately just drop like that into REM. They will sleep, okay? They're not losing consciousness. It's just they fall into the REM stage of sleep, okay? They can feel many times when the sleep attacks are coming on, okay? A lot of times, interestingly enough, overstimulation of the nervous system is what causes narcolepsy. So people who start to feel super excited, who start laughing an awful lot, they can end up starting to feel very sleepy and fatigued, and that can send them into a narcoleptic attack where they will just fall for several minutes into REM sleep, and then they'll come up out of it. Okay. It does start in adolescence. There is no cure for this. We don't know why excitement to the central nervous system seems to cause the narcoleptic attacks, but for whatever reason, it does. So it's very common for you to see circumstances where those who have narcolepsy will be prescribed naps. Okay. Napping can help to control the sense of sleepiness and fatigue. It's also possible that they could be prescribed stimulants because what would happen is when given those drugs, they can prevent the central nervous system from ultimately being overwhelmed, which seems really strange to kids when we talk about that. Like, why would you give a stimulated central nervous system stimulants? But if you think about it, it's no different than how they use Ritalin, which is a stimulant, to help treat people with ADHD, which is a hyperactivity disorder. So for whatever reason, it helps to kind of offset the narcoleptic attacks. Something for you to think about if you're interested is going to this video right here. This is Skeeter, the narcoleptic poodle. You can Google him, but he is a dog who has narcolepsy. And so you can see anytime that he is excited, you can see the attacks that hit him and how he will go instantaneously into REM and fall asleep when he is excited. Speaking of sleep issues, I can hear my son on my monitor. It sounds like Simon is awake, so I'm going to pause it right here. I'm going to come back in a second, and I'm going to finish this up for you. All right, I'm back. Looks like it's going to be a very long night. So let's talk about sleepwalking. Okay, we've only got this and REM behavior disorder to tackle before we are done for today. So I'll move myself out of the way, my little clip art guy. Sleepwalking's technical name is somnambulism. Okay. And so when you look at it in those sense, somnia means sleep and to ambulate means to walk. So that's why sleepwalking's technical name is somnambulism. Sleepwalking actually happens in stage 3 of sleep, not REM, which is when a lot of kids think that it happens. But it happens in the deepest stage of sleep when the body's muscles aren't paralyzing themselves. Okay? It's going to happen more often than not in the first 3 hours of sleep. The person is going to get up, they're going to have a very blank stare, move about in really slow, kind of automatic processes. They're going to do normal everyday tasks, okay? They may try to eat, get dressed, go to the bathroom. It just happens to be in the wrong place. I've heard of circumstances where some people have tried to drive. Luckily, that has not been able to come to fruition, thank goodness. But they're going to do regular, normal, everyday things. Many of you guys have actually done sleepwalking. You just didn't realize it because you weren't actually walking. It's sleep texting. Believe it or not, guys, sleep texting is an incredibly common issue now, particularly for your generation. Think about it. If sleepwalking involves a person getting up during stage 3 and carrying out regular everyday tasks, you guys are on your phones constantly. I've had kids share numerous circumstances where, and they even willingly sent me pictures, screenshots of these things that they sent in their sleep, where they sent a Snapchat or they sent a text message. It was total gibberish. It made no sense whatsoever. But they did it during stage 3. They woke up, they sent out the text, fell right back asleep, and they had no memory the next morning that they ever did it in the first place. So, thus is the sign of the times, I guess, that we're moving from just sleepwalking to people sleep texting. In terms of cause, we don't really know why it happens. There's no definitive cause for why it occurs. Um, in terms of treatment, though, we do have several different options that are available to people. If it's severe enough, a person can undergo medication with controlled meds, or they can go through hypnosis to try to get to the root of the problem for why it is that the person is doing those things. But for the most part, people usually outgrow it. I've often share circumstances about my younger brother. When we were little, he was a sleepwalker. But he did it very frequently. I've got some really good stories to share with you. Be sure to remind me to ask me about those when we have office hours with one another. But he outgrew it. He doesn't have sleepwalking issues terribly frequently any longer. It comes back every once in a while for him, but it's not a constant continuing issue. You absolutely do want to wake up a sleepwalker, though. I know that there's this like urban myth out there that you're not supposed to. Thank you, terrible horror movies. You desperately want to. Guys, you have to recognize that they are not of sound mind in that moment. Okay, so if you go back to this example of them trying to eat, let's say they, grab a knife to try to cut up a sandwich or something like that. Well, a butter knife is a little bit different than, say, a carving knife. And if they are, just in a very automatic process, it's very possible that they could cut themselves, hurt themselves. So you want to wake a sleepwalker. You want to, okay? And it very much could be a circumstance of keeping them safe. Okay, so it's totally okay to wake them. You're not going to cause permanent psychological harm. You're not going to scar them for life if you wake them up. You want to wake them. Okay. It also might be a good idea for you to remove damage or, like dangerous items that they could end up getting their hands on, depending if you keep them like, contained in a room or something like that. That sounds awful to say, but I have had kids who've shared with me that their parents truly had to lock them in their rooms because they would sleepwalk and they would leave the house in the process of all of it. Okay, so definitely some interesting stuff. Oh, night terrors. I forgot about night terrors. So night terrors are not the same as sleepwalking. They do happen in stage 3, just like sleepwalking does. And they're also, it's important to recognize, night terrors are also not the same as nightmares. Nightmares occur during REM. You remember nightmares. Okay, I had a nightmare when I was 10 years old that Garfield, the cartoon cat, was going to try to come eat me. I'm not kidding. I still remember that to this day, and I'm 35. Okay, and I had it when I was 10. Night terrors, the people that suffer from night terrors, they have no memory that they ever happened. And that's because of when they occur. Since it's happening in that stage 3 stuff again, they don't know that they're waking up screaming bloody murder with racing heart, sweating, okay, just incredibly intense images of terror that they're going through while asleep. They have no memory or recollection of it in the morning. Okay, so they'll fall back asleep. They've scared the ever-loving bejesus out of you. They fall right back to bed and they have no recollection of it in the morning. My daughter has had a couple of these. Simon, for the most part, has not gotten to this point just yet. But Eliza's had a couple of night terrors where she's woken up and she has just been beside herself. And I get her back down for bed. And I talk to her about it the next morning and I say, baby girl, what was going on? What happened? What was the problem? And she has no memory. She doesn't even realize that it happened. Okay. In terms of cause, a lot of times we think that it can connect to some kind of fear that a child has. A lot of times too, when there are disruptions to a kid's routine, that can be pretty overwhelming for them. Children thrive on routine. The world is a scary place to them. It's very overwhelming. And if you think about it, when you're a little kid, you can't do much for yourself. You got to rely on others around you. So when your routine gets thrown off, that can be pretty scary and overwhelming for little kids. And a lot of times when Eliza's had those night terrors, that's been when it's occurred, is there's been some kind of pretty substantial change to her situation, to her routine. So whether it's me going back to school at the end of a summer, or coming back to school after a long break, like Christmas break or something like that, it's not out of the ordinary for her to have a night terror for a couple of nights, and then she'll go back to normal and she'll be perfectly fine. Because kids can outgrow these for the most part. But if it's intense enough and significant enough, it is possible for a child to undergo therapy in order to be able to get to the root of the issue. Okay, so let's talk finally about REM behavior disorder. Okay, this video will show for you as we go through this. So REM behavior disorder is when the body's major muscles don't paralyze themselves. Okay, so what happens is the person acts out their dream, which is not safe. That's not good at all. Okay, we ended up kind of stumbling upon this particular issue with a case that occurred with a man who was put on trial for killing his wife, interestingly enough. And he told his defense team that he woke up after they had gone to bed. She was fine, and then he woke up in the morning and she was dead, and he had no memory of it. He didn't, he was not awake during whatever had come to pass. And so they said, okay, well, let's test you. Let's see if you're just like a super deep sleeper or something like that. And in the process of the defense going through all of this sleep testing, they came to realize that the man, his major muscles were not paralyzing themselves while he was asleep. And so, what they theorized was that he was having a bad dream. The wife was trying to wake him up, and he perceived that she was like the attacker in the dream or something along those lines. And he ended up accidentally killing her. So, we don't know much about REM behavior disorder. We don't know why it happens. We have no true cause. It affects men typically over the age of 60. We're not sure if there's just some kind of like degenerative process that seems to happen, that as you get older, the body's muscles just can't get the right messages. We're just not sure. And there's not really much known in terms of a treatment either to be able to help those who have this. Much of the research I was able to find on things was essentially just sleep in a separate room, because you could get hurt or harmed by a person if they can't recognize that they're dreaming at that moment and their muscles don't paralyze themselves. So I'm going to pop this up real fast and see if the video will go so you can see this gentleman. Oh, now it doesn't want to work for me. So I'll link it for you guys to be able to see what it how it all goes down. But this guy, you'll see him in the video. He basically starts to have a dream, and his limbs start to move. And at one point, he sits upright and just starts pounding the other side of the bed. And so it doesn't take much of a leap for kids to realize, what it would be like if there was somebody who was in that bed with him. They would be very, 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 very significantly injured in the aftermath of all of that. So anyway, this is the end of the video notes on sleep disorders. Hopefully you found it pretty interesting. Kids usually do. Be sure to Google yourself some Skeeter the narcoleptic poodle. We'll talk about him when we get the chance. But I hope all is well. Hope you're getting a good amount of sleep, and I will talk to you soon.